Hello. Today we'll talk about collaborative governance and the three paradoxes HR must embrace. But before I raise those paradoxes, I would like to introduce you to the concept of collaborative governance. Why is such a governance necessary today? One of the reasons is the complexity of today's business world. It requires agility. I don't need to tell you more about this. You know that. Secondly, and this is very important for HR people, the engagement of people. It is a growing worry by HR managers, but any managers within organizations today, it's really the level of engagement of people. If you take the Gallup 2017, it stated that about 10% of the people were really engaged in their work. 70% were not engaged, meaning that they were just expecting orders before taking any action. And 20% were actively disengaged, meaning that they were so frustrated that they could sometimes be ready to sabotage the work of their colleagues. Now, if you take this and translate it into a large bicycle, it would mean that one person is pedaling really a lot, 7 fake it, and 20% brake, which means that the bicycle doesn't really move very fast. Now, those two reasons explain why there is a need for a different type of management of people, allowing them to take more initiative and to be more engaged. And there have been numerous studies for the last decades on those subjects. One of them that you also probably know as HR manager is the work of Douglas McGregor and his vision X and Y of managers. Basically, he says, if we want to have people more engaged, we need to abandon the X vision of manager. And the X vision is simply being skillful at manipulating the sticks and the carrots in order to make them move forward. It works, but not so well. There is an alternative way which equals the Y vision of manager. Why does he call this a vision? Because basically the X vision is based on the idea that people are lazy and that they are only ready to work if they are pushed or motivated by some incentives. Well, McGregor showed that this is not really the case. People are ready to do their best at work, provided the culture at work is the right one, is adequate. Now, the question is, what is this adequate vision or this adequate culture at work? And in order to answer this, we need to move to DC and Ryan. There are two psychologists who in the 80s developed what they call the self-determination theory. They investigated millions of people across the globe, 42 countries, different types of companies, and they came with quite simple but very powerful results. Basically, what they tell us is the following. There are 4 basic motivators at work, 2 which are intrinsic and 2 which are extrinsic. The intrinsic motivators at work are fundamentally pleasure. Do I feel well? Am I happy working with my colleagues? And secondly, meaning. Meaning is my job meaningful? It's not just about the purpose of the company, but it's also my job within that company, which characterizes meaning. Those are the intrinsic motivators. Secondly, the extrinsic motivators are, according to their research, pride, which is basically the capacity of somebody to give orders to people. And some people take joy in this, pride, let's say. And lastly, of course, incentives, be they financial or symbolic. Large car, 3 windows instead of 2, and so on. You know that. Now, what DC and Ryan showed is that there are clear correlations between the intrinsic motivators and the extrinsic motivators and the physiological and psychological well-being of people. And they show that basically people who claim to find pleasure and meaning at work are more likely to have a high level of energy, to be better concentrated at work, to have high performance, to take on extra roles, to be more adaptive. on the contrary, people who state that they are mainly motivated by pride or incentives, and of course they do not say it explicitly, but through the surveys you can detect that, well, are more likely to have burnouts, to be more distracted, to have low performance, to have more antisocial behaviors, and generally speaking, to be less adaptive. Now, the question is, how can you increase the probability that people would find pleasure and meaning at work, if that is positive impact on their well-being? Well, you cannot, of course, tell them they should have joy. So you have to find other levers. And those levers are the following, according to DC and Ryan. There are three basic psychological factors that, if they are satisfied, will increase the likelihood that people would find pleasure and meaning at work. Those three basic psychological factors are affiliation, which means that I feel part of a group, I'm recognized within this group. Secondly, self-direction, which is another word for autonomy. But it doesn't mean that I can do whatever I want, however I want, whenever I want, and wherever I want. It just means that I can take all the initiatives I consider necessary in order to realize my objectives, the objectives that I received within the group, and this within the rules that we have collectively defined. This is a very important definition of self-direction, and which will explain a lot of things later. Basically, it leads us to resolving our first paradox, which means that self-direction goes hand in hand with very strict discipline and rules. And thirdly, personal growth. Do I feel I am growing as a person through my job, and not just as a factor of production? Now, what is interesting also about the results of the research of DC and Ryan is that basically they show us that it is the frustration of the same psychological factors which lead by compensation to the need by some for more pride or for more incentives. And as HR managers, I suppose you know those studies which show that an increase in, for example, financial bonuses have only very temporary effect on the engagement of the people. So those three factors are very important and are basically the three principles also that you find behind all the so-called collaborative governance approaches. And there are numerous, from the Teal approach of Frédéric Laloux with reinventing organization, the liberated organizations by Getz, holacracy by Robertson, or even sociocracy by Hindenburg, and so on. So you've got all kinds of collaborative governance. I'm talking here generically about all of them, and I do believe that basically what they share, explicitly or implicitly, is the belief that those three psychological factors should be more satisfied if we want to have better functioning organizations, and more importantly, even people who are motivated and who find well-being at work. Now, I will try to explain you how we can put those three principles in practice. I will base myself on my experience as a manager of different organizations, among which the Federal Ministry of Mobility, and we had some good results just after 3 years, like quality increase in services, speed increase in dealing with the files, a very, very strong fall in absenteeism and long-term sick leave, and yearly savings also in facility. Now, let's take in turn those three principles and show how they are associated with, let's say, posture of the manager. Of course, with affiliation goes respect for your people. Self-direction requires trust, of course, and personal growth requires care, caring for the people you are working with. Now, what I will state now is just a series of practices, but none of them is essential. You need to adapt them to the reality of your organization. What is very important is that they should be coherent. So let's start with affiliation and respect. How do you do this? Well, you make sure that basically you stimulate questioning, and you stimulate an open culture, a culture where people can raise questions without fear to anybody within the organization, be it the CEO or any manager. How do you achieve this? It's more than just saying that my door is always open. It is really adopting that kind of posture. And that can manifest itself through a co-development of the strategy with all the volunteers, whatever their ranks within the company. Open management meetings to all. For example, at the ministry, basically the management committee was open to everybody. We gave the reports about our decisions to everybody too. So there was really an open atmosphere in those meetings. We also started to provide trainings on drivers of the organization to anybody within the organization, not just according to their ranks or management level. We encouraged criticisms, and this manifested itself, for example, by encouraging people to leave any meeting where they feel they were wasting their time. And God knows if there are today a lot of meetings where people feel they are wasting their time. And you should be able to leave them without even have to justify yourself. I'll come back to that if you want. Second, co-decision, really to have meetings, structured meetings, through which people can really feel their voice is included, that take the form of electing, for example, a facilitator within the team, who is not the manager of the team, to adopt consent-based decision processes, to make decisions or elections without candidates. I will explain this later if you are interested. And to establish check-in and check-outs and silences, pauses during the meetings in order to calm things down if necessary. And finally, to act with fairness and humility, which means that managers need to change their posture and adopt a low posture instead of a high one, to be really at the service of their people instead of controlling them, to renounce also the power symbols that they have and which are often non-necessary, which create discrimination and resentment. If you move to open spaces, you have to do it for all, including the CEO, the directors, whatever their ranks. To be aware that we need to take care of the most vulnerable in whatever decision we make, because we need to win for all and with all within the company. That can mean that we have sometimes to part with some people, but the general approach should be to really take care of the most vulnerable within the group. To set up a 360-degree feedbacks and evaluation, and to move from individual to collective bonuses. Basically, if you do this, not only, what you will get, basically, is that people start to want to take initiatives more and more. Now, second big principle and psychological factor, self-direction, requiring trust. How do you organize this? And once again, this is where the first paradox I wanted to highlight comes into the picture, is that you need to define clear boundaries and rules to work together. So it's not like because you have a collaborative governance, people do what they want. No, they do what they feel is right without having to have the approval of a boss, but within clear rules. And these needs to be codified and adopted formally. Now, to give you an example, at the ministry, when we started to stop the obligation of clocking in and clocking out, we also coupled that with clear objectives, clear roles and responsibilities. And clear roles and responsibilities is much more than just a job description. Job descriptions are, most of the time, totally useless, except when people do not want to do something and claim this is not in my job description. So basically, we should get rid of those documents which try to detail what some people should do. What is important is why they do it and what they are responsible for. The way they organize themselves is left to their own device. This is important, and this should be done quickly and in group, so that we check for the overlaps in what people do or not do, and find agreements on how to resolve them. And also boundaries could mean that you move from a classic hierarchy to a circle-based one, which means basically that it's not so much the circle versus the pyramid which is important here. It's that basically you move from a hierarchy of people to a hierarchy of purposes. Each circle has its own purpose, which contributes to the purpose of the higher circles. And a role or a responsibility is fundamentally a circle, but adopted by one person. A person can have several roles in different circles, which gives a lot of flexibility in the way people move around, change their responsibilities, and so on. And of course, you can have roles similar, but they have always a specific domain, so that you cannot confuse a role for another. What is very important is to provide full transparency and accessibility to those roles and responsibilities and OKRs, objectives and key results, of anybody within the organization. So even if I am a young recruit, I should be able to see what are the roles and responsibility and OKRs of the CEO and of anybody else within the organization. Also, you should distribute leadership, which means that you split, reallocate, solicit, and decide. What I mean by this is that instead of having to look for the approval of somebody to make a decision within your role, you should solicit the advice of the people who are most likely to be impacted by your decisions. Move faster because I see I have less time than I expected, but I'll keep it till the end. Final important, let's say, practice when you do this, and this leads me to the second paradox, is that in order to establish a collaborative governance, you need a very strong decision made by the CEO. And you could say it's almost an autocratic decision to move towards a collaborative governance, because it's impossible, of course, to have a collaborative decision to move towards a collaborative governance. Why? Because there are, most of the time, a lot of resistance, especially at managerial levels, because it means for them to have to delegate some of their power to their people, and a lot of them are not always ready to do so. So such a move towards a collaborative governance will not be possible without a very strong decision by one person, and it should be, in my mind, the CEO. It cannot be just decided by somebody else at other levels within the organization. Well, technically it might be, but those initiatives then will not last very long, because they will not be supported by the whole organization. So you should make those decisions, and possibly what you will do is to try to support the most motivated at first and let the other follow later on. Come back to that too. So if you've got self-direction and trust, then not only people want to take initiative, but they also feel they have the freedom, liberty to take those initiatives. And finally, personal growth and care. How can you achieve this? Well, by making sure that it is a responsibility by anybody, but of course also by HR people, to help everybody within the organization to find their sweet spot, or ikigai in Japanese, which is basically the type of roles and responsibilities that will provide to everybody, to each person, the best combination of their abilities, of the relevance of those roles for the company, and the enjoyment, the pleasure that those people have to do those tasks. I'll come back to that if necessary, but I think it's an important concept. Secondly, of course, is to allow people to explore by giving them regular, informal, descriptive and positive feedback. And this is much more important than the yearly or 6-monthly formal evaluation, which most of the time is a very bureaucratic task, annoying everybody. Secondly, craft. really what is important is to take a holistic view of efficiency. If we look at a narrow in a narrow sense to efficiency, it doesn't work. And the best example for this is Buurzorg, but I don't have the time now to explain it, so I will do so in the debate if you are interested. And finally is to build authentic relationships, and to do this, the best thing is to train everybody within the company in nonviolent communication. With all this, I would come to an end by saying that not only then people will want to take initiatives, have the freedom to take them, but also will feel that they are capable to do so. Now, to wrap it up, I would like to highlight that in order to make this change possible towards a collaborative governance, you basically need to work at 3 levels, and those 3 levels are very important. The first one is the organizational one, and it's putting in place all kinds of practices like the ones I've just highlighted, which will help to move in this direction. But this is not enough. What you need is to have those organizational changes supported by a culture in which really people feel there is trust. And this trust is embodied by acts of trust, which are performed every day by the management. Now, in order to achieve this, this requires a personal transformation by anybody within the organization, but starting, of course, at the top. It requires an authentic posture of trust by the managers, and starting with the CEO. This is essential. And this is my last paradox, I would say, is that it is impossible to move towards a collaborative governance, even with the, let's say, the best practices, if there is not a readiness and a willingness, a commitment by the top management to work on their posture. Without that, all the practices you will try to put in place will be welcomed with cynicism by your people, and it will end miserably. It would even be better not to try. And to work on this personal transformation by the top management is essential. It is possible, and if it is done, it really leads also to a much higher well-being by the top management. Trust me on this. I've gone through this path, and I can only recommend it to you. Thank you.